My in-laws imprisoned me in their remote cabin after my spouse died, leaving me the life insurance and refused me food until I surrendered the payout. For 8 days, I weakened to near death in that freezing room, until I picked the ancient lock and drove straight to one attorney who seized their assets. The bobby pin was slick with blood from my torn fingertips when the lock finally clicked. Day 8. Maybe day 9, I'd lost count somewhere around the 3rd day without food. The room spun as I stood, grabbed the door frame to keep from falling. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else, weak and distant. Through the gap in the door, I could see the empty hallway, hear Thomas and Barbara downstairs arguing about something, voices muffled through the old floorboards. My father-in-law's truck keys hung on the hook by the front door. I could see them from where I stood, 30 feet. Might as well have been 30 miles. I made myself move anyway. One step, another. The hallway floor creaked and I froze, waited for footsteps. Nothing. They were too busy fighting about how much longer they could keep me here before someone noticed. I kept moving. I need to go back 6 weeks to explain how a software engineer from Seattle ended up locked in a bedroom in rural Montana, starving, freezing, fighting for his life against his dead wife's parents. My wife Lydia died on a Friday in October. Brain aneurysm. She was 32. We'd been married for 6 years, together for 9. She was a graphic designer, brilliant and funny, my entire world. We were at a coffee shop near our apartment when it happened. She said her head hurt, then she collapsed. I rode in the ambulance, held her hand while the paramedics worked. She was gone before we reached the hospital. Dr. Evelyn Cho, the attending physician with 18 years in emergency medicine, told me there was nothing anyone could have done. Sometimes these things just happened. Catastrophic. Instantaneous. I sat in that hospital hallway until security made me leave. The funeral was the following week. Small service, maybe 50 people, at a chapel Lydia would have hated because she'd never been religious, but her parents insisted. Thomas and Barbara Whitmore flew in from Montana, where they'd retired 5 years earlier, to a property they'd bought with family money. Old money. The kind that came with expectations and judgments. They'd never liked me. I was working class, first-generation college, not good enough for their daughter in their eyes. Lydia had loved me anyway, married me despite their disapproval, maintained a distant but functional relationship with them. They were cold at the funeral. Polite, but cold. Thomas shook my hand with the enthusiasm of someone touching something unpleasant. Barbara hugged me briefly and said nothing. I thought they were just grieving. I was wrong about a lot of things. The life insurance paperwork arrived 2 weeks after the funeral. Lydia had taken out a policy through her employer 3 years earlier when we'd started talking about buying a house. $500,000. I was listed as the sole beneficiary. I'd forgotten the policy existed. The money felt wrong, felt like blood money, but it was there. I called the insurance company, verified the claim, started the process. The claims adjuster, a woman named Patricia Elwood, who'd been processing life insurance for 26 years, said it would take 4 to 6 weeks to finalize. She sent condolences. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat in our empty apartment and tried to figure out how to keep existing without Lydia. Thomas called 3 days later. First time he'd called me directly in years. Said he and Barbara wanted to check on me, see how I was holding up. I said I was managing. He said they were worried about me being alone, grieving by myself in the city. Said they wanted me to come stay with them for a while, get some mountain air, some peace and quiet. I said I appreciated the offer, but I needed to work, needed the routine. He said I should take time off, that grief required space to process. He said it would mean a lot to them to have me there, to feel close to Lydia through me. That got me. The idea that spending time with them could somehow keep her memory alive. I was vulnerable and stupid, and I said yes. I drove to Montana the following weekend. 10-hour drive through mountains and forests to a town called Millbrook, population 300, where Thomas and Barbara had bought a cabin on 80 acres of wilderness. The property was beautiful in a stark, isolating way. Dense woods, no neighbors for miles, a single gravel road leading in and out. The cabin was larger than I'd expected. 3 bedrooms, 2 floors, stone fireplace, wraparound porch. Barbara met me at the door with cookies and coffee. Thomas took my bags. They were warmer than I'd ever seen them. I thought maybe Lydia's death had changed them, made them realize family mattered. I thought grief had softened their sharp edges. I was so unbelievably wrong. The first few days were fine. We cooked together, watched old movies, talked about Lydia. They showed me photo albums from her childhood, told me stories I'd never heard. Barbara cried while looking at pictures. Thomas got quiet and withdrawn. I felt like we were bonding over our shared loss. On day 4, Thomas asked about the life insurance, said he'd heard there was a policy. I confirmed it, said the claim was being processed. He asked how much. I told him $500,000. His expression changed for just a second, something sharp and calculating, then smoothed back to concerned father-in-law. He said that was good, that Lydia would want me taken care of. I agreed. He asked if I'd thought about what I'd do with it. I said I hadn't really thought beyond paying off our credit cards and maybe putting some in savings. He nodded and changed the subject. If you are enjoying this story already, please subscribe to see more stories like this. Day 5, Barbara brought up the topic again. We were having breakfast, just the two of us. Thomas had gone into town for supplies. She said they'd been talking, her and Thomas, about the insurance money. Said they wanted to make sure I handled it wisely, that Lydia would want her money used responsibly. I said it wasn't Lydia's money, it was insurance money. But yes, I planned to be responsible. Barbara said that was good, but had I considered that they'd raised Lydia, invested in her education, given her opportunities? Said in a way, anything Lydia had was partly theirs. I felt cold, suddenly. Asked what she was suggesting. She backtracked, said she wasn't suggesting anything, just thinking out loud. Said we were family and family supported each other. I excused myself and went for a walk in the woods. That night, the temperature dropped below freezing. I woke up shivering around 2 a.m. The heat had been turned off. I got up, went downstairs to check the thermostat. Thomas was standing in the kitchen. Said the furnace was acting up, he'd look at it in the morning. I said I'd help. He said no need, go back to bed. His voice had an edge I hadn't heard before. I went back to bed but couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong. I started thinking about leaving, making an excuse about work, driving back to Seattle. I should have trusted that instinct. Instead, I stayed. Day 6, I woke up to voices downstairs. Thomas and Barbara arguing about something. I got dressed and came down. They stopped talking when they saw me. Barbara made pancakes. Thomas read the newspaper. Everything seemed normal, but the air felt charged. After breakfast, I said I should probably head back to Seattle soon, that I'd imposed on their hospitality long enough. Thomas said nonsense. I should stay as long as I needed. Barbara agreed, said they loved having me there. I said I appreciated it, but really should get back. Thomas's expression hardened. He said we needed to have a conversation first, about the insurance money. We sat in the living room. Thomas did most of the talking. Said they'd been thinking a lot about the situation, about what was fair and right. Said Lydia was their only child, that they'd devoted their lives to raising her, that she'd been taken from them far too young. Said the insurance payout represented Lydia's life, her value, and they deserved a share of it. I stared at him, trying to understand if he was serious. Asked what kind of share he was thinking. He said half, $250,000. I laughed because I thought he had to be joking. He wasn't laughing. Barbara sat next to him, arms crossed, face set. I said that wasn't how life insurance worked, that I was the beneficiary, that the money was legally mine. Thomas said legality and morality weren't always the same thing. Said I'd only been with Lydia for 9 years while they'd been her parents for 32. Said by any measure of investment and loss, they deserved half. I stood up and said I was leaving. Walked toward the stairs to pack my things. Thomas moved fast for a man in his 60s, grabbed my arm, spun me around, said I wasn't going anywhere until we reached an agreement. I pulled free, told him he was insane, told him I was calling the police. Reached for my phone. It wasn't in my pocket. Barbara was holding it. She'd taken it from my jacket while I was sleeping. I realized how isolated we were. No phone, no neighbors, no witnesses. Thomas said they'd give me time to think about it, to come to the right decision. Barbara said they weren't unreasonable people, they just wanted what was fair. Thomas grabbed my arm again, harder this time, started pulling me toward the stairs. I tried to fight, but he was strong, had 40 pounds on me. Barbara helped, pushed me from behind. They forced me up the stairs, down the hall, into the smallest bedroom at the back of the cabin. The room had a bed, a dresser, a window that had been nailed shut with boards. I realized they'd planned this. This wasn't spontaneous. They'd prepared. Thomas shoved me inside, told me to think carefully about what was right. Said when I was ready to be reasonable, to sign over half the insurance money, they'd let me out. I rushed the door as he closed it, heard the lock click, heard their footsteps on the stairs. I pounded on the door, screamed at them, demanded my phone, demanded they let me go. No response, just silence and the sound of my own breathing. The first day locked in that room, I tried everything to get out. Threw my weight against the door until my shoulder was bruised and swollen. Tried to pry the boards off the window, but they were secured with 3-inch screws driven deep into the frame. Looked for anything I could use as a tool or weapon. Nothing. The room had been stripped. Just the bed with its frame bolted to the floor, the dresser that was empty except for a single blanket. I screamed until my voice gave out, pounded on the walls. Nobody came. By nightfall, I understood the reality. I was trapped, completely and utterly trapped in the middle of nowhere with 2 people who'd apparently lost their minds. Thomas brought food the second day, opened the door a crack, slid in a plate with a sandwich and a bottle of water. I rushed the door, but he was ready, slammed it shut before I could get through, asked through the door if I'd reconsidered. I told him to go to hell. He said he'd check back tomorrow. The sandwich sat on the floor for hours before I ate it. Pride versus survival. Survival won. I ate, drank half the water. Tried to ration it. Spent the night shivering under the single thin blanket, no heat in the room, temperature outside dropping into the 20s. My breath came out in visible clouds. Day 3. No food. Thomas came to the door mid-morning, asked if I was ready to be reasonable. I said they were committing a crime, that kidnapping and extortion were felonies, that they'd go to prison. He laughed, said nobody knew I was here, that I'd driven myself here voluntarily, that I could leave any time I wanted if I just signed some papers. Said all they wanted was what was fair, what Lydia would have wanted. I told him Lydia would have been horrified by what they were doing. He went quiet. Then he said I had 2 more days to think about it before things got uncomfortable. I said things were already uncomfortable. He said I had no idea what uncomfortable meant yet. Walked away. No food, no water. The hunger started as an ache, then became sharp pains, then evolved into a constant gnawing presence I couldn't ignore. The thirst was worse. My mouth dried out, tongue felt swollen, lips cracked and bled. I tried to stay warm, wrapped the blanket around myself, did push-ups and jumping jacks to generate body heat. The exercise made me dizzy, made the hunger worse. I lay on the bed and tried to think clearly, tried to make a plan. The window was impossible without tools. The door was solid oak with a deadbolt. The walls were plaster over wooden studs. Might be possible to break through, but would take days and make noise they'd hear. The lock was old, probably original to the cabin. Old locks could be picked. I'd seen videos, never tried it myself. Needed something thin and strong. Started examining the bed frame. Day 4, Barbara came to the door. Softer approach. Said she knew this was hard, but they were trying to protect me from myself. Said young people made poor financial decisions, that they were trying to help me be responsible with Lydia's legacy. Said they'd already consulted with an attorney, drawn up papers that would transfer half the insurance payout to them, all legal and proper. Said I just needed to sign when the money came through. I asked what happened if I refused. She said they'd keep me here until I saw reason. Said they had plenty of supplies, could wait as long as necessary. I asked if she understood they were starving me. She said they were encouraging me to make good choices. Said the discomfort would end as soon as I agreed to do the right thing. I called her a monster. She walked away. Day 5 or 6, time started blurring. So thirsty I couldn't think straight. Found a bobby pin under the dresser, probably from whoever used this room before. Spent hours trying to manipulate it into the lock mechanism. My hands shook too much, kept dropping it. Finally got it wedged in, but couldn't feel what I was doing, couldn't understand the mechanics. Gave up. Lay on the bed. Wondered if I'd die here. Wondered if that's what they wanted. Take the insurance money as my next of kin once I was gone. Realized that might actually be the plan. Panic set in. Real panic. The kind that makes you hyperventilate and see spots. Day 7, maybe. Thomas opened the door. I was too weak to rush him. He brought in a stack of papers and a pen. Set them on the floor. Said the insurance company had approved the claim. Money would be dispersed within 48 hours. Said the papers were a binding agreement to transfer $250,000 to him and Barbara immediately upon receipt. Said all I had to do was sign, and this would be over. I could eat, drink, leave. I asked what guarantee I had they'd actually let me go. He said I'd have to trust them. I laughed, a cracked, broken sound. Said I'd rather die. He said that could be arranged. Picked up the papers and pen, left, locked the door. The cold was constant now, deep in my bones, making my joints ache. I couldn't stop shaking. My thoughts came slow, like wading through mud. Knew I was in serious danger. Dehydration, hypothermia, starvation. Any one of them could kill me. All 3 together meant I had maybe 2 days left. Picked up the bobby pin again, worked at the lock with fingers I could barely feel. Hours passed. Nothing. The pin kept slipping. Then something shifted. A tiny click. My heart jumped. Worked the pin different, felt resistance, felt something give. Another click. The mechanism turned. The door opened an inch. I lay there staring at that gap, trying to process that it was real. Took everything I had to stand up. The hallway was dark, late evening probably. Voices downstairs, Thomas and Barbara in the kitchen. I moved like a ghost, each step deliberate and silent. The stairs were the dangerous part. Old wood, prone to creaking. I took them one at a time, weight on the outside edges where they were most stable. Made it down. The front door was 10 feet away. Thomas's truck keys on the hook, his wallet next to them. I grabbed both. Unlocked the front door as quietly as I could. Stepped out into the freezing night. The truck was parked 30 yards away, felt like a mile. I made it to the truck, climbed in, keys in the ignition. The engine turned over with a roar that shattered the silence. Lights came on in the cabin. Thomas burst out the front door. I threw the truck in reverse, floored it. He ran toward me, but I was already moving. Spun the truck around, headed down the gravel driveway. In the rearview mirror, Thomas was getting smaller. Barbara appeared next to him. They stood there watching me leave. I drove. The nearest town was Millbrook, 23 miles of winding mountain roads. I drove 70 on roads meant for 40, hands white-knuckled on the wheel, shaking from cold and adrenaline and starvation. Made it to town around midnight. Everything was closed except a gas station. Pulled in. The attendant, a kid maybe 19, took one look at me and reached for his phone. I must have looked like a corpse. Told him to call the police. He asked if I needed an ambulance. I said police first. He called. I sat on the floor of the gas station and waited. Sheriff's Deputy Lawrence Harding arrived 12 minutes later. 31 years old, 6 years with the county sheriff's office. He walked in, saw me, immediately called for an ambulance, asked what happened. I told him everything. He took notes, asked if I needed medical attention. I said yes, but it could wait until I talked to an attorney. He said an attorney could wait until I got medical attention. I insisted. He looked at me like I was crazy but handed me his phone. I called information, asked for attorneys in Millbrook. They gave me 3 names. I called the first. Answering service. Second. Same. Third. A woman named Victoria Lang answered her personal cell on the 4th ring. I told her I needed help immediately, that I'd been held prisoner and extorted, that I needed someone to freeze my in-laws' assets before they disappeared. She said she'd meet me at the hospital. The ambulance came. Paramedics got me stabilized, started an IV, wrapped me in heated blankets, took me to Millbrook Regional Hospital, tiny facility with maybe 20 beds. Dr. Nathan Sterling, emergency medicine physician with 16 years experience, examined me. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, stage 1 hypothermia, multiple contusions and abrasions. He said I was lucky to be alive, that another day or 2 could have been fatal. I told him to document everything, take photos, preserve evidence. He understood. Did a complete examination, photographed every injury, wrote detailed notes, gave me fluids, electrolytes, kept me overnight for observation. Victoria Lang showed up at the hospital at 1 in the morning. 48 years old, 23 years practicing law, specializing in criminal defense and personal injury. She sat by my bed, and I told her everything again. Every detail. She recorded it on her phone with my permission, asked if I had any evidence. I showed her the bruises, the torn fingertips, my cracked lips, pulled out Thomas's wallet that I'd grabbed, still had it in my pocket. Inside was a receipt from the hardware store dated 8 days earlier. Screws and brackets and deadbolt hardware. Proof they'd prepared the room. Victoria photographed it all, asked if I wanted to press charges. I said absolutely. She said she'd contact the county prosecutor first thing in the morning. Asked about the insurance money. I said it should hit my account within 48 hours. She said we needed to act fast. By 6 in the morning, Victoria had filed emergency motions. Restraining order against Thomas and Barbara, freeze on any accounts or assets in their names. Criminal complaint for kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, extortion, and assault. The county prosecutor, a man named Gregory Vaughn with 12 years in the office, reviewed the complaint at 8, called Victoria, said he was taking the case, that he'd send deputies to arrest them immediately. By 9, sheriff's deputies were at the Whitmore cabin. Thomas and Barbara were taken into custody. I was still in the hospital bed when Victoria called to tell me. Said they'd both been arrested, were being held without bail, that they'd lawyered up and weren't talking. The investigation moved fast. Deputies searched the cabin, found the room where I'd been held, the boarded window, the stripped furniture, food supplies in the kitchen that proved they had no intention of feeding me, text messages between Thomas and Barbara discussing how long they could keep me without serious medical consequences. The papers they'd tried to make me sign, sitting on Thomas's desk, evidence of premeditation and planning. The county prosecutor filed formal charges, kidnapping in the 1st degree, unlawful imprisonment, extortion, assault. Combined, they were looking at 40 to 60 years in prison. The insurance money hit my account on day 3 of my hospital stay, $500,000. Victoria had already filed civil suits on my behalf. Emotional distress, wrongful imprisonment, attempted theft. We were seeking punitive damages, full restitution, and seizure of Thomas and Barbara's property. The cabin, the 80 acres, their retirement accounts, everything. The civil case moved parallel to the criminal case. Within 2 weeks, a judge had frozen all their assets pending trial. They couldn't touch their property, couldn't sell anything, couldn't access their accounts. They were in county jail and financially paralyzed. I spent a week in the hospital recovering. Dr. Sterling monitored my progress, said I'd been maybe 36 hours from organ failure when I arrived. The IV fluids and nutrition brought me back, slowly. My weight had dropped from 170 to 143. I was gaunt, hollow-eyed, looked like I'd aged 10 years. Physical therapy helped me rebuild strength. A psychiatrist, Dr. Helen Rourke, with 19 years specializing in trauma, came to evaluate me. Diagnosed acute PTSD, recommended intensive therapy. I agreed, knew I'd need it. The criminal trial happened 4 months later. Thomas and Barbara pled not guilty, claimed I'd come to stay with them voluntarily, that they'd never imprisoned me, that I'd had a mental breakdown from grief and imagined everything. Their attorney, a public defender named Robert Thorne, tried to paint me as unstable and unreliable. Victoria destroyed that narrative, presented the medical evidence, Dr. Sterling's testimony about my condition when I arrived, the photos of my injuries. The hardware store receipt, the boarded window, the text messages, the papers they'd tried to make me sign. Deputy Harding testified about finding me at the gas station. The gas station attendant described my condition. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 3 hours, guilty on all counts. Thomas was sentenced to 32 years. Barbara got 28. Both would be eligible for parole after serving 85%. They'd be in their 90s. The judge, a woman named Patricia Moreno with 26 years on the bench, Said she'd rarely seen such calculated cruelty, such a profound betrayal of family trust. Said they'd imprisoned a grieving man and tried to extort him while he mourned their daughter. Said the sentences reflected the severity of their crimes. Thomas showed no emotion. Barbara cried. The civil case settled 6 months later. Victoria negotiated a complete transfer of all assets to me in lieu of trial. The cabin, the land, their retirement accounts, everything they owned. Total value around $1.3 million. I signed the papers, took ownership of the property where they'd tried to kill me. Spent one afternoon there with a real estate agent, listed it immediately, sold it within a month to a family from California who wanted a mountain retreat. Never set foot inside again after that one visit. Didn't want their money in the same account as Lydia's insurance money. Kept them separate. The insurance money stayed untouched in a memorial fund I established in Lydia's name, providing scholarships for young graphic designers. The money from the asset seizure went into a separate account I used to rebuild my life. I moved out of Seattle. Too many memories. Relocated to Portland, started over. New job at a different tech company. New apartment, new therapist. Dr. Rourke had referred me to someone local, a trauma specialist named Andrew Fletcher with 21 years experience. Weekly sessions for the first year, then bi-weekly, then monthly. The PTSD was persistent. Nightmares about being locked in that room. Panic attacks in small spaces. Trust issues that made relationships impossible. Dr. Fletcher said it would take years to process fully. I believed him. The story went public during the trial. Local media covered it extensively. Then regional news picked it up. Then national. Grieving husband imprisoned by in-laws demanding life insurance payout. It went viral. Cable news ran segments. Internet forums exploded with outrage. I got interview requests, book deal offers, movie rights inquiries. Turned them all down. Didn't want to profit from it beyond the legal restitution. Didn't want my trauma turned into entertainment. Just wanted to heal and move forward. Eventually, the media moved on to the next story. The attention faded. I was grateful. 3 years later, I'm 41. Still in Portland. Still single, though I've started dating cautiously. Still in therapy, though less frequently now. The nightmares come less often. The panic attacks are manageable. I've learned to live with what happened without letting it define me. The scholarship fund in Lydia's name has helped 18 students so far. That feels right. Feels like her money is doing what she would have wanted. The money from Thomas and Barbara, I've used some for living expenses. Invested the rest. Thinking about buying a house. Something small, in the city, with neighbors close by. Never somewhere isolated again. Thomas and Barbara are still in prison. I get updates occasionally through Victoria, who's become something like a friend. They've both applied for early release multiple times. Denied every time. They'll likely die in prison. I don't feel satisfaction about that. Don't feel much of anything. They're just two people who made terrible choices and faced appropriate consequences. The fact that they were family, that they'd raised the woman I loved, makes it sadder, but not more forgivable. I visited Lydia's grave last month, first time in 2 years. Told her about the scholarship fund, about the students her memory was helping. Told her I was doing okay, that I was surviving, that I missed her every day. Told her I was sorry about her parents, sorry she'd had to grow up with people capable of what they'd done. Sat there for an hour, just being near her. When I left, I felt lighter somehow. Like I'd gotten permission to keep living, to keep moving forward, like she'd have wanted me to be okay more than anything else. If this story keeps your interest, please subscribe to get more stories like this. What I learned from all of it is that grief makes people do terrible things sometimes. Thomas and Barbara lost their only child, and it broke something in them, turned them into monsters who saw money as compensation for loss. They convinced themselves they deserved that insurance payout, that taking it from me was justified. They were wrong, but understanding how they got there doesn't excuse what they did. It just makes it comprehensible. Human evil is usually more pathetic than dramatic. Two elderly people imprisoning their son-in-law over money they didn't need, risking murder charges over greed disguised as grief. Pathetic and monstrous both. I carry the bobby pin in my wallet now, the one I used to pick the lock. Keep it as a reminder that I survived, that I fought back, that I refused to surrender even when I was at my weakest. Some people think that's morbid. Dr. Fletcher says it's a healthy symbol of resilience. Either way, it's mine. My story. My survival. And nobody can take that from me. Not even the people who tried to take everything else. The insurance money was never the point. The point was that I'm still here, still breathing, still building a life. That's the victory they couldn't steal, no matter how long they kept me in that freezing room. I won by surviving. Everything that came after was just making them pay for trying to break me, and they'll be paying for the rest of their lives. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.